I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. Broken forever.
Is it still hurting?
Yeah. Well, now it's like, I think none of the muscles are firing. I think like my core isn't, you know how like your muscles forget? No. Okay, it's fine. Doesn't matter. Oh, how much of this podcast is small talk about my ailments?
Yeah. Well, you are 140, so it happens.
I was talking to the kids this morning about the difference in me as a mom with my oldest, which I had when I was 17, and them who I had in my 30s. And I said, you know, me as a mom in my 30s versus me as a mom in my 17s. And then the rest of the car ride was them not letting that go. When you were in your 70s, you can't say something stupid in front of your kids.
Especially your kids. Your kids will just...
It just is...
punk you for the rest of the day on it.
Yeah. The time I tried to say, eat your steak now, fuck the potatoes, they're taking too long. And I said, I'm going to give you your steak now, and then I'm going to fuck the potatoes. To this day, when I give them potatoes, they're like, what did you do to these?
Also, we don't have clean mouths in this household.
No.
Just as a preface. It's like, you're saying fuck around your kids?
Yeah, I never got into that weird construct. And
Yeah, I mean, we don't encourage that they say it around other adults, but
no. But Phoenix would not let that go. When he was young, was like, why am I not allowed to say that? Because I would just say grown up words because I think calling it bad words is stupid. And he was like, why will you, why can I not say that? And I was like, I don't know, because people think it's bad. Why is it bad? I don't know. Just certain people.
It's weird. I'm like kind of torn as I've become older. Not like I've always enjoyed certain words that are like emphasis points on making a really strong point. Like that word specifically is really helpful when you're trying to like really emphasize something. But the more I'm trying to be like, the more we talk on podcasts and I listen to myself talk, I sometimes am like, my vocabulary feels limited sometimes. Definitely when I'm trying to get across like some hard point, some paradoxical point, I'm glitching because I don't have the proper words.
Yeah, suddenly the file of your vocabulary is like 6 words and it's like things and stuff.
And like and thing, yes. And the thing. And I'm torn because there is like, I think for some people when there's a lot of like curse words in their like dialogue of describing something that is profound, it kind of like can pull people out of it. It's like, this isn't an intellectual person, which I don't agree with that. I think these are just choice words and sometimes they're funny to use, curse words in a serious topic. It's kind of lightens the thing, but I am torn to be like, am I limiting my vocabulary by just using these?
You barely cuss though.
Yeah, but
I feel like, are you talking to me right? Are you talking about me right now?
No, I'm talking about me too. I cuss more than you think, probably. Not like it's some moral thing. I don't really care about that, and they're useful. But I just am realizing sometimes I'm like when I listen to really smart people talk, they're rarely using those kind of emphasizing words. They're using other more powerful emphasizing words, but they're bigger and they're like, you think with as much as I read, my vocabulary would start to expand, and it has a bit, but still, I think when I'm trying to speak from like an authentic place, my brain doesn't go to that library of words. If I hear them, I'm like, oh, I know that word. I don't use it though,
So here's what's interesting. I have 5 different places we can go from here. I sent you this thing that we were actually going to talk about on the podcast, and I think we forgot about it. About the use of and like is actually, I edit all that out. Like we both say a lot. Sometimes we'll get on a kick where you're saying like a lot. And I've always edited that stuff out of podcasts to make it flow faster. I have ADHD. So I take out a lot of dead air and stuff to make the podcast go fast. And something I have noticed is that I actually kind of like some people's cadence when it has I feel like the or is communicating something. And I realize when you or I start saying or a lot, you can kind of tell that we are putting things together in the moment.
Right.
And so there's a TikTok I sent you, 6 months ago, of a guy who is a professional like debater. And so he learned how to talk without any of those things. And he was explaining why they're actually like a necessary part of communication, and specifically is often communicating something. Like it's communicating, I'm thinking about what I'm saying, or I'm going to go and, make another point now. So I've learned to start leaving them in certain spots where they are communicating something. And yeah, like in stand-up, you learn how to use word economy and trim out all those extra words and, not say fucking too many times. You can always tell someone's kind of amateur if they're saying a lot. But then there are these like much more authentic comedians who just let their language show up however it's going to show up.
Right.
And if it's a part of their personality and they're not insecure about it, there's something actually kind of like ASMR-y about, something kind of soothing about it. And I think as we move away from word-based communication and start moving into telepathic, I think that the telepathic communication will be verbal still for a while. And that's something that you and I notice. Like, it kind of doesn't even matter what words you say. I usually know what you're talking about.
Right.
When we get tangled up in each other's communication, it's almost always when I'm hung up on words. Like I just dropped that objective, subjective episode on my Patreon. And if you take out the word, like, I know exactly what you're saying. I'm like debating the meaning of the word.
And the word, the word in spirituality, the word objective has become villainized because there's a certain point that we have to get to understand so much of the, quote, objective truth that has been given to us is actually not objective. It's all kind of lies. And so then we buck against everyone that's going, no, this is fact. When there's a certain level of awareness that you've realized that's actually not fact. That's your subjective perspective. So objective becomes this villainized thing. And therefore, when we want to talk about the nuance of it, it's hard to get past that issue where it's like, no, objective is the villain right now. And in a certain sense it is. But yeah, I think that's what it was really difficult to me is when you start to get into these complex ideas and thoughts of like understanding paradox, words are just really difficult to use to point to the thing. And so we're often trying to like come up in the moment we have a thought that we're trying to explain, and trying to have like word economy within that is really difficult because there aren't words that can describe it. And so we're always trying to grasp to new concepts and ideas that don't have judgment on them. They haven't been villainized. They haven't been overused in a wrong way to try to point to the thing in a fresh perspective. But it's like, it's just so difficult. It really, a lot of this, the spiritual and like esoteric concepts that are a part of understanding yourself and understanding reality are like hidden behind the words. And so when people in the past have tried to explain that, they've used certain words that then get hijacked and, corrupted. And so then you have to try to be creative and come up with new versions of how to point to that thing that everybody was pointing to in ancient texts, but they've now been co-opted with religion and, dogma. It's like it's a real challenge, but I think it is when I'm in the moment, there's a lot of ums, there's likes, there's pauses, because I'm trying to find a new way to describe the thing,
Yeah. And so I when we start doing video podcasts, I don't know how much of that stuff I'm going to be able to edit out. And my relationship to it is starting to change. I mean, way back 6 years ago in a Soberish episode when Ramin and I first met, I had mentioned that I edit that stuff out, and he was like, why? That's the good stuff, And I just know for me, back then, I guess, probably the comedian in me, the person who had like spent time learning how to speak without that stuff, it just stood out really loud to me. But I think now my relationship with it has probably changed. I mean, sometimes you get on like a I don't mean you, but like people get on like a and I find like that's usually what I start doing if I'm thinking about one thing and speaking about another. My brain is like buffering. But your vocabulary, not on a mic, is actually very diverse. And it's almost like you can connect it to your nervous system state. Just me observing you can connect it to your nervous system state, how much access you have to that vocabulary. And right. I know that's absolutely true for me. So if I'm in a socially anxious situation, I go from being someone who has, like, I love learning new words and incorporating them into my vocabulary and whatever. But the way I talk with you and the way I talk, if you put me into a social situation with people, like I'm in fight or flight kind of. And then I'm like things and stuff. Yeah,
you're very limited to the words to use to describe something.
Yeah. And a lot of like transposing words, like the words will come out backwards, which is why in stand-up, I always had to memorize my set exactly, because just being in a room full of strangers staring at me, I would be having a nervous system reaction before I understood what a nervous system reaction was. And I would switch all the words around so I wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, and your mind goes blank.
Yeah. So I think that has something to do with it as well, because you do have a deep vocabulary. But I would keep getting, so we were just having a conversation this morning about universality, and there's not enough words. And I think that's a thing in the English language, right? Like,
there are other languages that have many more words to describe certain effects and actions, emotions, and reality. And the English language, because it's kind of stemmed from all these other ancient languages, it's gotten whittled down to be, which is crazy, because when you think about it, when you have just one language to communicate and to think in, you realize like the language is your buffer to be able to access certain ideas. Like if you only know English, you're kind of limited in the way that you can think of ideas and explain them. But you can think of the ideas, like they can come up, but they are these like downloaded, like a bunch of information. You're like, oh, I understand it. Now I need to figure out how to communicate it. Okay, let me use this limited language that has been given to us. And that's why it's so difficult. But if you spoke Greek or like Mandarin,
even German, I used to have a book called They Have a Word for That.
Yeah.
And it was just like words for, I would say like non-material, non-physical things. And a ton of those words were German. Like, do you think it's like I feel like the American English is like a psyop.
It is. When I've looked into it before, like etymology and stuff, there is some,
if you only give us words to describe material things, then we will be trapped in the material, right?
Yeah. And it's really interesting when I've read a lot of books that are originally written in other languages, like German, Russian, Carl Jung, it's all Austrian. He wrote the Red Book in, a different language. And when you deal with the translations, the ideas that were originally portrayed by the author are like dumbed down, and there are certain really good translators will have to tackle this issue, and they will have roadblocks in being able to translate in English the point the author was making, and they can't. And so then they will keep a lot of the original words in and try to unpack, in the footnotes, like the many different versions of this word. And we're keeping it in because phonetically it's telling you something as well, the way it sounds, the way the word is combined with other words etymologically. It's like pointing to something that if we just dumb this down to the English version, you wouldn't get the same effect. And it's really interesting because some translated books are dense. They're hard to understand in the English language because they're not making as much sense as it probably did in Russian or something. And so they're like, that's why the Red Book it's hard to read, because it's in English, it's like, it's so dense. One sentence you have to sit with for a while, because it's like you have to understand what he's pointing to. And what he's pointing to is something that he's conceiving in a different language. So it's really interesting. I do think when you look at where it's all derived from, it's like Latin and Greek, and some of these ancient books like the Kabbalah and stuff are apparently very esoteric and sacred texts, because they are really coherently translating a deep truth of reality. But then the hijack came when that book was like too powerful. Let's translate it. Let's get everybody speaking in English that's going to be derived from all of these things, and then that will keep them astray. It's like the Tower of Babel stuff. It's like change up their language, diversify them so they can. It's very difficult to find this truth.
Yeah.
But that's why etymology is so interesting, because you can decode a lot of words and bring it back to Latin or Greek and go, oh shit, this word has been combined in a way to make us think of one thing, but when you cut it up into these separate words that are pointing to 5 other different concepts, you can make that one word point to 5 different things instead of just one.
Yeah.
So it's a part of the matrix that I think is really interesting to study, because that's where a lot of the hidden meaning is. And it's through symbolism and metaphor where you find these like deeper esoteric truths that the English language just like doesn't point to it unless you start to learn how to decode it.
Yeah, I feel like I can't think of any right now, of course, but I feel like there were a lot of words in the Bible that when I was a Christian, the way that we would engage with that word was completely separate from the way you would engage with that word in any other context. It was just like some made up fucking meaning of the word. And I'm like, the word doesn't mean that in any other context. So why are we saying it means that now?
Right.
I can't think of any examples right now.
There's so many. And I think that's the importance like of trying to seek for like new information that's hidden, is learning how to derive the meaning that's behind the collection of words, not read it literally and linearly. And I think that's not a lot of people are able to do that. People that are really programmed and mechanistic, it's you take the words as like this ultimate truth. Okay, this is what you're meaning, when poetry is such a great way where you can combine words in a certain way where when you read it, you get an image in your head of something else that's a metaphor, and that's where the real meaning is. Poetry is like a great example to see that, but then you can start to apply that to any text that you're reading. Is trying to like, you're reading what it feels like for me when I'm reading the words linearly with one part of my mind, and then it is building an image or building a meaning that's like above it or behind it.
Yeah.
That's starting to come into like more visual, like I'm starting to understand it, but it's like two parts of my brain. So I'm like reading the text linearly like I learned in school, and then it's building this concept above it. And that's where all the hidden shit is like in that meaning. But it is, you know, done subjectively. Like you build it with your own creativity and kind of understanding of metaphor and all of that, which is kind of a feeling based thing. But the more you learn about etymology, it starts to give you more palette, like colors to build those images. So when you're reading words that you once, you know, understood meant one thing, now that you see the combination of the syllables in that word are pointing to like 5 other words, then you have more palette to build the metaphor. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. There's 2 different things that seem to be happening right now. It's one, I do think we're moving away from, and I guess by we, I mean people on a consciousness journey, because this obviously isn't universal, but moving away from needing words to communicate and like communicating through the mental center, I guess. So the words are meaning less and less, and kind of the frequency is mattering. And that's why we're seeing like, I don't know, the most comfortable way to sit makes me breathe like I'm masturbating.
Is that how you sound?
I took that from my friend Sam. I was on a phone call with her. She was pregnant and on a walk. And she was like, I'm walking up a hill, so I sound like I'm masturbating. And it's funny, but then also like I don't heavily...
Don't want to think of that. Well, now you got everybody on the podcast.
I just don't know that it doesn't matter. Okay.
Masturbator is a really interesting etymological mix-up of words.
Yeah, what is it?
Master, and then baiter, to bait, but you're the master of the bait.
Well, yeah, you're the master of baiting a 4D jizz goblin.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone was like, why didn't you name that episode Jizz Goblin? It's like, because you cannot you can't put Jizz Goblin on YouTube, dude. They'll take it down. Anyway, where were we? Oh, I feel like we're moving away from needing words to communicate, and it's also kind of breaking down this I don't know, I feel like the world was run by people who had good words, but shitty intentions because everyone was just listening to the words and not the intentions. And I feel like that's something you and I are still deprogramming, where I'm like, well, if I take it at the words, or this person saying words that match what I believe, but then you get duped because they were bullshitting. Right. And I notice that when someone's saying words that match what I believe, it's hard to stay in my discernment because they sound like I agree with them. And I feel like that's everything that's happening in the political landscape right now is like just continuously pointing that to us, right?
And the spiritual landscape, the Aubrey Marcus concept.
It's a great example, right? And so I feel like we're learning all of this discernment to learn to just, eventually become completely telepathic. But in the meantime, being able to read the energy, not just the words.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like there is this move, and this is just based on things on the internet, there is this move toward people who just take things extremely literally. So they can't read satire. They can't read sarcasm. And I don't know how much of that is just like because we're writing in text, because I have a hard time reading tone in text. I guess I have bad reading comprehension. I don't know. I never knew that about myself, but I noticed this in my engagement with comments and stuff. A lot of times what I think someone's saying in a comment and I respond to it, or even like a question on a live stream, how I engage with it isn't what they're saying.
Right.
But it seems like there is also this move towards people taking things very literally and not reading the energy. And so that's interesting. And I wouldn't necessarily say that's like people on a consciousness journey and not. So
I feel like it kind of does delineate, and this probably isn't wholeheartedly true. There's exceptions, but that most people that don't have the ability to kind of consciously awaken and see the subtleties and their subjectivity and objective truth and what's being fed to them kind of deeply in their programming, they only know how to read literally, and they obsess with the words that you're saying. And if that resonates, then they go, I trust that. They don't have the ability to read the energy behind it, and see the subtle intention of this person that you can tell is kind of lying, and they're putting these words in places that like make it seem like they're saying one thing, but there's more behind that. I do think it kind of delineates, as far as when I watch on TikTok and just interact with people that don't have the ability to understand metaphor and like what you're trying to point to as an idea are limited. They're like just automatons. They kind of just read linearly and take everything someone says that's in power as truth, and they don't subtly see that this person's lying or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a skill. I guess I'm kind of thinking of like, there is a flavor of autism that is very literal and takes things very literal. I think Phoenix is kind of like that. Although Phoenix is really good at picking up on vibes, there's definitely like a glitch that happens in his brain between literal. Yeah, it was interesting. He was extremely literal and very frustrated with like rhetorical questions when he was young, What is a rhetorical question? It's a question that doesn't need an answer. Well, then it's not a question. Yeah, I know. It's like and then there's just, Phoenix's brain would just like grind on that Phoenix is like 4 and like, why do rhetorical questions exist? But now he's very sarcastic. So I guess he didn't like sarcasm when he was young though, because it didn't match. You're saying this, but you mean this. What the fuck is that? You know? So I feel like a lot of people have that isn't necessarily the same thing as easily duped, taking things at face value. And I feel like the opposite pendulum of the taking things at face value. It is easy to take things at face value when it's what you want to be true. That's right. And I catch that in myself. I'll say you see that in the political landscape where it's like, I'm going to assume the other side is always lying, and I'm going to assume my side is always telling the truth, when in fact they're both lying, and they both are just going to tell you what you want to hear. I find myself if you're telling me what I want to hear, it's really hard for me. I don't necessarily get into the tribalism of it. Like, this is my team, but I notice I have to constantly be like forcing the bullshit filter when someone is saying something I want to hear.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's crazy how easy that, like, yeah, bitch. And it's like, no, you're all liars.
Yeah. It's like trying to always be highly skeptical when you hear someone talk is helpful.
Yeah.
To me, it helps you discern if they're lying, discern the truth and the metaphor behind what's being said. But it is very difficult when there's a bias in play. You have a dog in the fight.
Yeah, it's just constantly going, do I have a dog in the fight? Do I have a dog in the fight? Like, the difference between how easy it is. I just did a class on discernment on the Patreon and talked about I had like a list of questions to ask yourself when discerning a situation. And it's so different for me if I'm doing a session with someone or doing like a live reading and people ask a question to which I have no emotional attachment and it's a stranger and I don't know you, the discernment is like that. But if you're asking a question that pings on something I have a prejudice about, it gets much cloudier for me to like read what's specific to you. And if you're asking me a question and it's you asking me a question, I'm emotionally attached to what I want it to be. It's just like it's not impossible to discern, but it is much more difficult to discern. This kind of takes me to something else I want to talk about. We are like buried in 4 kids home for summer.
Camps, pools.
We've got Mark's daughter for the summer. We've got conveniently my grandson and Mark's daughter are the same age, so he kind of hangs here. Also, his mom lives like five minutes down the road, so we all just kind of do the family thing in the summer, and the kids are in camp this week, and so we are just
mush-brained.
When we sat down to do a podcast, we're like, what is consciousness? You know what I mean? I feel like I am in a perpetual state of making lunches or driving to camp or breaking down lunches or... And yesterday, Phoenix, the 15-year-old, has celiac, and they got dosed with... This is the one day we didn't send them with a lunch, and they got chicken nuggets, chicken strips, and then apparently the cafeteria didn't know the difference between plant-based and gluten-free, which gluten is wheat and wheat is a plant. And as a matter of fact, when you get fake chicken, it's actually just made out of gluten.
Yeah, it's just all wheat.
It's not just you got a chicken strip wrapped in some gluten. You got a gluten slug wrapped in more gluten. And so, yeah, it's been kind of chaotic here. We had to rush some charcoal to the camp. Anyway, so we were kind of scraping the barrel of things to talk about, because usually we hop on the podcast and we talk about things we're already kind of talking about, but we're just in a different mode right now. So I thought it might be a good time to cover a couple things that, I don't know, I feel like there's some things we say on the podcast that, judging by the comments, this could be my incorrect reading of the comments, but it seems like there are a couple items that just get misunderstood repeatedly. So we're going to take another crack at explaining a couple things. And then I had another interesting thing about profile lines in human design. Which one do you want to do first? You want to talk about universality, or
sure,
you don't care? Universality. Okay, so this one was interesting. We did talk about this once, and I'm pretty sure I cut it out. But if it's a repeat, my bad. But I'm 99% sure I cut it out. There have been a few different things that we've talked about on this podcast that I like state an opinion, and then people say, well, like, not me, that doesn't apply to me. And something I've noticed in myself is almost like a fawning, like a fakeness in me to try to appease people who think I'm being judgmental, right? And so something I've just observed is like I will then be inauthentic, meaning like I'm betraying the truth that I know to be true in order to universalize my perspective, make my perspective apply to absolutely everyone. And 5 years ago, this was like bad. Like it was to the point where I was just straight up saying things I don't actually believe in order to like appease everyone. And now I'm just observing like the trigger in me when I share my perspective and people take it as judgmental, or people take it as, I don't know, short-sighted or something. And when I was doing this course with Kelsey, I said something in that course that was like, I think I was saying that I think that I noticed that some people are terrified of the collapse of infrastructure and other people are excited for it. And I just said, I think I have a theory that it's individual circuitry that determines that. And I'm pretty sure I said it was a theory, but maybe I try not to say things as absolute facts. I try to constantly, disclaim that my perspective is just like my perspective. But I think then someone was like, no, that doesn't apply to me or whatever. And I'm not talking about like people being triggered because they're not always triggered, but like just someone being like, no, that doesn't apply to me or whatever. And then that shame came back. And then I was talking to Kelsey and I guess trying to like explain how I didn't get it right or whatever. And Kelsey explained to me that according to your profile lines, we have different perspectives. So I'm a 1-3, and I might butcher this, but 1 is you investigate. It's very personal. Like you investigate and want to get to the bottom of it. 2 is you need to be alone. Don't come at me if I get these wrong because this is just one conversation. You need to be alone to kind of absorb it and process it. 3 is you need to get out there and try it and experiment with it. 4 is, okay, I've got it figured out. I think I need to tell everyone else about it. 5 is like, I need to share this universally. Like I have this universalized perspective to share, I think is how it goes. And then 6, like 4 is more evangelical, I think. And so I know the 4 lines, like I've heard this a couple different places, feel like everyone needs to know about their perspective, like you quit something and then 5 minutes later, you're like, everyone needs to quit it, Right. And then, the 5th line is the heretic, which, when they're doing their best, they're kind of the well actually of the, in a good way, And then the 6th line just lives it. Like the 6th line doesn't need to tell you shit, doesn't need to preach a sermon, doesn't need to make sure everyone knows, it just lives it. So it's a role model. And so I'm a 1-3. So I am meant to investigate things and try them out. Investigate things and try them out. And then what I bring to the table is like personal experience. And so when I say, I think that drinking lowers your vibration, or I say that I think that getting fucked up every single day, arrests your development and slows your development. Or I say, I don't think that, people in their 40s should start relationships with, people in their mid-20s. Those things are based on my personal life experience. They're based on like the investigative part of me is always like voyeuristically watching and studying what other people are doing for patterns. And then that 3rd line, like I've had a lot of 3rd line experience, like a lot. And so all those things I'm talking about, when I have like a strong opinion on something, it comes from a lot of experience. And so, but it's just my experience, and that's really all I am supposed to share. So she explained to me that day, because she's a 5th line, She explained to me that day that like, I'm not meant to share universal truths. I'm not meant to, and by universal, this is a place where there's not enough words, because universal means something else to us. But universal means if I state an opinion, it can apply to everyone. And there's like no exceptions, right? Is the type of things a fifth line would be sharing. But I'm not here to share that. There's the reason I have like life hacks. And that's kind of like how to hack through things and make them as easy as possible or whatever. Those all are from personal experience or like deep, deep investigation for me. And my investigation's very voyeuristic and relies on pattern recognition. And so if I'm going to share a life hack, 9 times out of 10, I've done it and tried it and saw whether or not it worked. But if I'm talking about something I've just investigated, this is why I don't come up, the one line, I don't come up with an opinion. If there's something happening out in culture, you don't get my immediate opinion or out in the world politics or whatever. I have to sit with it for a long time because I have to listen to both sides. I have to discern who's saying what. And I like to come up with my own take that's not from someone else. But my takes are always going to be based on like my perspective. And I'm not meant to have universal perspectives. Now, another use of that word, I do understand some universal laws, meaning like non-physical laws of how things work. Once again, I've learned those through a lifetime of experimenting with them. But when I share an opinion, basically what we're talking about, my opinions are not meant to encompass the entirety of the world's experience. And there's this thing called like bean soup theory where this woman shared a bean soup recipe on social media. And then a bunch of people in the comments were like, what if I can't have beans? You know, like we're losing the ability to go, oh, this isn't for me.
Right.
You know, there seems to be something about this exchange from Cross of Planning to Cross of Sleeping Phoenix. I think it's a combination of the shadows of the two that has turned us into kind of toddlers in that we are in some ways like expecting every single thing to apply to every single one of us. Right. Do you know what I mean? Which is a very, like, I think of like children under the age of 5. You have to really like, yeah, everything's not for you. Like if he has that, it doesn't mean you have to have that, you know? And so we seem to be grappling with that. And something I've just learned about myself is like, I have a shame about having my own perspective without it including people who can't have beans, you know? And so for my own process into stepping into my power, I'm just like, if I share an opinion, I don't care what you do, you know? If you're in my personal life, and you know this, if you're in my personal life, like I work very hard to not impose my opinions on other people. But even in my personal life, outside of like talking to microphones, people in my personal life who do those things, you know, who, I mean, the thing about dating younger people, it's just like, I don't know, that's my rule for myself. I don't really care what you do. If you're a man in your 40s dating women in their 20s, yeah, I'm side-eyeing you. Who cares? You know what I mean? I'm not a woman in your 20s, so that's not going to affect. You can prove me wrong. I just, you know, it is definitely a cultural thing, and it is typically a product of patriarchy. And so if you've got a different thing going on, cool, man, do your different thing, you know? But I know like in the past, I talked about alcohol. I don't have positive opinions on alcohol. I don't have positive opinions on alcohol for consciousness. I can list off the reasons that I think the alcohol really sets people back in their consciousness journey. And I've not seen exceptions to that. And I've been around a lot of substance use. And so my opinions on substance use are like, I was raised by addicts. I was an addict. I've had kids with 2 addicts. I've lived around altering my entire life. I then got in a relationship with you who altered every single day when we met. So it's like, I don't know, my opinions, I don't think I was overtly judgmental about that, but I'm not like, it's interesting the way that we relate to other people's opinions and the entire concept of judgmental Because when I think of judgmental, I guess I think of something that's more intrusive, where it's like you're legislating. I don't think your fucking opinions on abortion should be legislated because it's not your body. You don't like an abortion, don't get an abortion. You don't like gay marriage, don't get gay married. I don't understand crossing into other people's lives with your judgments. But I'm also just learning about how to be a solid person and have my perspective and my opinion. I'm very open-minded. So if someone in my actual life that I see on a day-to-day basis and can watch the consequences of their actions proves me wrong, I'm like very quick to change my mind. But, you know, there are people in my life in the last couple of years who were altering every day. And it's just very obvious to me that the problems they were having were the result of altering every day. And then there was like, they felt judged by my opinions. I wasn't doing anything with those opinions, but I can't help what I'm observing. You know what I mean? If you're walking into a brick wall over and over and over again, you're like, I can't figure out why my forehead's bleeding. And I'm just observing that it's bleeding because you're walking into a wall. I can't I have this desire to gaslight myself from my own perspective in order to not be seen as judgmental. And it was just when Kelsey first told me that I'm not meant to be universal and that she was, I was actually not offended, but was just like, I didn't get what she was saying. And then when I sat with it for a few days, I was like, oh, that's actually deeply liberating because I keep trying to be universal. But for me to be universal is for me to lie to myself about what I understand to be true at that time. Doesn't mean it's not a universal fact. It's true for me. And so that was something I just thought was really interesting. And that is also really funny because I have a ton of fourth lines in my life. And they definitely have that evangelical thing, which is like what fourth lines are supposed to be. Like you're supposed to be because that spreads the knowledge,
right.
You know?
And I think it brings up the subtle thing that when we are realizing we each have our own truths that we have to start to learn to navigate, and what could be a personal truth that is, you know, activating and helps growth at one point could become not true anymore, is by, you know, learning from other people's subjective truths and them sharing, well, this is what's true for me. You know, when I drink alcohol, it opens me up to more honesty. And that's something I'm struggling with right now. And to somebody that has had experience with alcohol being just a drawback, then goes, wait a minute, but you're saying it's good, then you feel insecure about your own experience. That's right. Your own truth. And so you resist taking on this other person's subjective truth as like something that you need to consider for yourself, because it's like bumping up against what you have, you know, deduced to be valuable to you. And so then this is where it's like, it's hard for, I think, us to be moving into this fractal unity where we can all have our own truths and coexist is very difficult, because some of those truths are going to like not be true for another person. And we might, you know, agree on all other things, but then there's this one thing that is like so opposite. And so how do you, you know, connect with those people and learn from it? And I think it, you know, it is having an open mind and realizing that like what might be true for you isn't going to be true for somebody else. That doesn't mean it's this invalid thing, or it's like, but I think there is a pursuit of, like, we're all pursuing something that is kind of true for everybody that we can all adhere to help grow and expand. And I just think it's very hard when we're leaning on this, everyone has their own truth and let them be.
But see, I don't think anyone's leaning on that. I think everyone's really struggling with that.
No, I agree.
Two other examples are like when women started talking about the experiences they were negative experiences they were having with men. There were a lot of men who had to be like, not all of us.
Right.
You know, and it's like, let women talk about this. Or when, you know, people of color were talking about the experiences they had with white people. Some of my favorite creators don't like white people. And they have a kind of general sweeping opinion of white people that, you know, I like the content and the thing that they're talking about, but then, you know, I have to deal with the feelings when they talk about white people as if they are this monolithic nightmare thing. And it's like in that moment, I feel the thing rise up and go, but I'm not like that. And then it's like they're speaking from their experience, and I don't know this person. They're a person on the internet. It would be different if they were a close personal friend and they were saying things like that, you know, but they're a person on the internet expressing their perspective. And so with that part, I've had to learn to, like, for a long time, I like internalize that. But I had to learn to, like, okay, well, I take that part with a grain of salt because that's their experience. Does it apply to me? You know, I can look at that and go, you know, I've definitely found in people expressing the issues with white people, like I've definitely found some shadows and some things that I didn't realize were, you know, unhealthy or harmful to other people. So I'm like open to that. But then if it's just like they're speaking about all the people that they've interacted with, it just doesn't apply. It just can just flow over me because it's like they're not talking to me. And even if they hold this belief, I don't know them. Like they're on the internet. They're a person. I listen to their content. And, you know, there are certain people where that opinion, it just got to the point where it's like, it's hard for me to listen to the content. And so I'm not going to listen to this person anymore. And then there are other people who, like, you know, I showed you like an astrologer that I like. But that is there as well. So I kind of have to like take that with a grain of salt. But I think in this culture, we really struggle with everyone's opinions not perfectly encompassing our perspective. I feel like we're really struggling with just letting people, like, that's what that perspective believes. Or in the subject of, you know, people of color talking about white people or women talking about men, people are trying to like figure out their trauma. And in the middle of women finally getting to like collectively unpack, I'll speak to the one I was on that side, collectively unpack, you know, sexual abuse and harassment and prejudice and all these things is so fucking irritating to have and you are the most not like that man I've ever met in my life. I've never met a man in my life with less like weird imposing on women thing. Like you don't have that at all. Like you lack that thing, that like driven by sex, pushy, like thing. And you also don't have a lot of the other thing. Like a lot of the videos about men with like, you know, weaponized incompetence and making the woman do everything or whatever. It's like, I'm the mess in this house. You are very conscientious. You're the most mindful in this house of the impact you have on other people. You aren't any of that. But you would never pipe up and say not all men, ever. Like when you hear women talking about men, you're just like, yeah, I've noticed that. It's gross. Like you just don't, you know, it's not you. And so you don't internalize it as you. And I've never when women are talking about men, ever seen you be like, well, actually, you know, ever. And so I think that because you don't have that. And I think because you don't I voyeuristically watch the way that people interact with each other so much on the internet that, well, you definitely know it's rampant. I mean, you've like seen it, right? But I think that, and this goes back to that, I guess, that subjective and objective thing. But I think the reason we can't collectively tap into an actual objective agreed upon truth is because people have not mastered understanding your perspective, your fractal.
100%.
Yet.
Yeah, that's what
and not needing everyone else's fractal to validate your experience. That's another one. The very immature, needing everyone to validate your definitions of things and the words you use and shit. It's very, very, like when you raise children, it's very like under the age of like 7 behavior.
Yeah, I feel like it's growing pains of coming out of a reality where we were all looking to connect by agreeing on some objective truth. Like this is what is true. Now let's all adhere to that.
Right.
And we're to get out of that trauma of being fed a bunch of lies that we all agree on, and we start to uncover a lot of these like deep, what we thought was a deep truth is actually a lie. Then we all start vying for where is that objective truth? What is it? And I don't think we can get to that agreement place without first learning that like what you feel and see and know to be true for yourself is valid, and that is what you have to like work through. But as we're doing that, it's like we're all hung over from needing an objective truth to feel okay with my subjective being. And so while we're in that process, it's like we're trying to learn how to connect with each other and also realize like your subjective truth is so different than mine. Now, how do we connect? And I think the first habit, the instinct, is find the objective truth that I need to project onto this other person and tell them to adhere to it. So the bean soup thing is like, well, this is a great recipe, but like I can't use it because I'm allergic to beans. So tell me what the objective truth is that I can adhere to make this recipe. When it's like, just don't make bean soup because you're allergic to beans. So make a different soup. So that it's like this weird, it does feel like we're all kids because it's a new way of being, of like learning how to fall into your subjectivity and then be okay with listening to somebody else's opinion that might be radically different and figure out how to be open-minded to that and take something into that you can learn from, even if it is just, oh, that's interesting. Like, I'm not going to judge what you're saying because it's not true for me, but like, that's interesting. It works for you. Tell me more about why alcohol is actually helping your spiritual growth. I want to know like something that I thought is so true for me. Like, how is that true for you? And then I think what that does start to lead to is an understanding of like how we fractally connect as subjective units, all one, but all very different. And like how we interplay and interconnect. And I think it's like kind of an unknown for us because we have lived in a reality that was always handed like seemingly objective truths that were actually just somebody else's subjective desire to make us all be a certain way. Yeah. And it's just very difficult to get out of that. It's like a hangover. It's like we've been in hypnosis for so long. And so it's going to be clunky as we start to, really adhere to our subjective truth as like the ultimate thing, but then we come across somebody else that has interesting information that contradicts what our truth is, and not desiring to judge that or reach out and go, hey, but not all men, or like, hey, but not me. I can date younger women, and here's why. From a place that's just sharing, being like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, that's cool that it's true for you. I understand what you're saying. But for me, I have dated younger people, and there's been this really great growth, and I've seen this, to then just share subjective truths to each other, right? To get a bigger picture of like how we're all connecting, or to start to get a bigger picture of like what within all of these subjective beings living in their truths is collectively true about it, that are the more difficult paradoxical truths, back to the subjective objective kind of idea. But it feels, I see what you're saying. It's like we're a bunch of kids trying to kind of, grab a toy, and then the other kid's like, no, I want that toy. It's like, well, hold on, I'm trying to figure out.
Why does she, well, we're dealing with a lot of this, right? Like, why I don't have one of those, she has one of those, why don't I have one of those? And it's like, it's a very like emotionally immature. I think the feeling of someone's opinion is that I'm bad or that I'm doing something wrong. Like, I think that's very human. And I think the feeling is very valid, right? So when I hear someone, especially a creator that I respect, sharing an opinion about something that like I've done or I'm doing or I've embodied, I did a lot of this. I've done a lot of things that are like considered bad by, the consensus morality or whatever. For a long time, addicts were considered the scum of the earth. Like, the embracing of addicts as victims of whatever is relatively new. It certainly wasn't when I was using or when I first got clean. I just use that as a mirror to, first check in. That's the first thing I do is check in. Like, is this true? Is this true for me? Like, how is it hitting? Is it triggering me? Is it triggering me because I'm afraid it's true? Is it triggering me because I find that it's almost relieving if it triggers me and I go, do I embody that? And then I can like release that behavior. I can be more considerate or more empathetic. But sometimes it's just like people have opinions that don't embody my experience. And then I have to check in and go, does this have any impact on my life? If it's a stranger on the internet, a content creator, it has no impact on my life. And if it's a person in my personal life, it has no impact in my life. Like there were times where you were pretty anti-tech when we first met. Like you didn't hang out on social media. You weren't into any of that. I was very on my phone. My kids were very on their phones. And you were not into that. You had judgments about that. You had opinions about that based on your life experience up until that point. And I was not short of people judging me for that. And so I think when we first met, I still had some internalized beliefs that I was doing something wrong. I think because it was criticized in past relationships and friendships. And so sometimes when you would walk by and I'd be on my phone and you'd walk by, I'd be on my phone again, I would start to feel shame, or I would start to fawn and be like, oh, I just got back on it, or I would be like, can't tell me what to do. And as I healed my relationship with it, I just came to understand that like, it might look weird that I'm looking at my phone. I understand why certain people think that. For me, the phone is a bottomless resource of information that I could not get in the natural world. I don't get to like peep in on people's conversations and understand what makes people tick in the natural world. If I went to a park and sat on a park bench so I could listen to two people work out an argument, I would get arrested, right? Like the internet provides me an opportunity to do that. It provides me an opportunity to explore my curiosities, to crunch numbers, to figure out downloads, all kinds of stuff. And so in the physical, it may look like I'm staring at my phone, but for me, I'm actually like using the endless well of information. And I am of the belief that there are benefits for children as well. And it's not a popular opinion and I don't care. And so now I have worked it out. I don't experience, you've actually kind of changed your opinions on a lot of that stuff. But I engaged with your opinion of me as like a mirror of my own opinion. And when I stopped feeling shame about it, I stopped experiencing you as judging me. Because even if you still had your opinion, it just was none of my business.
Yeah, well, and I think this is a great example. What's interesting about this is that like I came to that with my own subjective experience of the negative side of social media, which was when we're in a group setting and everybody's in a room, and I'm looking to connect in conversation or talk or let's play a game or something. When everybody's just like vegetables on their phone and like tuned into their own world, it's an impediment to like me wanting to connect. And then also just the sides I think that are, now overly like forced onto culture is that like we're losing a lot of our people connecting skills by being on social media all the time. And this is pulling us away from our humanity and all of those things, which are true. But I was making that the ultimate truth about social media and was not open to what are the positive sides of it. Beyond like knowing that, yeah, this is connecting us to a bunch of people in the world. And as an artist, this is a great tool to get art out to other people. And so like I knew that, but what was interesting is then, being in love with you and being in a relationship and you being so that way. And when I came in, me being so the other way, I then was like, I was maybe judgmental at first and would voice my opinion. Like, let's hang out. All you guys are just on your phones. Like, what are we doing? Should we all just go in our own rooms and just be alone, which I like sometimes. But I think it then came up where we like started to discuss it. And when you explained it to me in the way you just did, like, hey, one way that I like understand reality and it's like a fun thing for me to do is be voyeuristic and look at the collective people talking to each other, what their problems are, what all of that. Like I'm downloading information. It's like you're reading a book. For me,
Right.
I go to read a book and I get all this new information and I learn how to apply it. You're doing that with social media. And when you explained it that way, I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Like there is no other way to do that but through the phone. Okay, I was wrong a little bit on my assessment of this being all negative. And, then later on talking about it with kids using it or just other people using it for different reasons, that the idea of spirituality being this like inner pursuit and being able to go inside your own consciousness and understand the different versions of you that are talking to yourself, that are kind of making you do certain things, making you feel certain ways, looping on your mind, like to go inside and understand all of that is such an important thing. And when someone is on their phone, they are in an internal world. Now they are like looking at something externally, but they're processing it internally. And you're kind of opening a portal into an internal world that you're experiencing. That sometimes, like we talk about it a lot, like when kids are on an iPad too long, they're not in their body. Like they're somewhere else but they're doing something there. It's in their imagination, and there's a benefit to using it as a portal to go inside and process things. And so what I was viewing as, everybody being a vegetable on their phone, just like vegging out, isn't just that actually. Like it can be that, of course, but it can also be a way for, especially like kids that are on the spectrum, to get into their mind and feel safe and not feel like they have to mask and constantly be social and be, out in the world. There's a healthiness to like kind of getting into an internal state where you can feel safe. So I think for me, it was understanding my subjective like perspective of it that was based on a certain experience that I had was kind of one-sided, and that there was this other perspective about the same thing that I could see was positive. And so then it opened me up to be like, oh, I don't need to be judgmental about this, because what I was assuming was somebody just vegging out and like not being in touch with themselves. They actually are in a certain way. And so I think that's a great example of like having a subjective opinion and then listening to what other people are subjectively experiencing on the same topic allows us to find a balance point in the middle to let somebody else be, like let them be that way, because I see why it's working for you. And my judgment on it was kind of closed-minded and just projecting my personal experience onto them.
Right.
And so I think that's what that's the attempt, is to try for all of us to do that with everybody and have your subjective opinion, but then be open to hearing what somebody else's experience is with it and finding a bridge of understanding through that you can let everybody be who they are and not try to project your way of being onto everybody, because it just doesn't work.
Right. And I feel like, but though that judgment, you needed to be like living in a house with people who already previously had these relationships with technology. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like had technology come out while we were together, I may have been more likely to subscribe to your perspective of it and maybe not get into it or whatever. So it's like life experience that changed your opinion of that.
Yeah, and then I don't drop the opinion that I had before. I also understand the negative sides of it, and like we talk about that, and you see that now too. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I have actually been on this for 4 hours today, and I'm now in a low vibration, so I need to like kind of. It's because I've got in a TikTok wormhole that's all negative stuff, and so I learned something, but like now I need to get out of it, get back into my body, ground, and like come back up to a higher vibration. And so that's what's beautiful about it, is like it wasn't like we came into that and like I was all wrong. I got it wrong, and now I need to adhere to your perspective. It was like, oh, I see the positive side, but also the negative side's still there. And
yeah, and really for me, the lesson in that is not about changing your mind, because whether or not you think it is valid doesn't change it for me. It was really just about like trusting my own experience, like my own experience. I understand why you believe that about the phone, and I understand that that's what it looks like from the outside. I don't disagree that it looks dystopian when everyone's just walking around looking at their phones. However, I personally, the phone is one of the best, like the internet's the best thing that ever happened to me in this realm, because there wasn't a lot for me, like that hunger for knowledge or for more input or to things to pattern recognize, an opportunity to observe people without having to be in social situations. Like it's something I longed for when the internet came out, and I was in I guess I was like 19 or 20 when it first became accessible. Like it was like someone was like, here, magic is real, you know, and it has had. And then when social media became a thing, I became obsessed with that because it provides 24-hour around the clock access to social opportunities. This is when like Facebook was real. Yeah. Before it was just a federal website. When Facebook was big, it was like I can opt into social opportunities whenever I want without having to leave my house, without having to put me into the stressful things. It was everything I'd ever craved was now available. It was like I was built for that. Like I'm built for the internet. And that might not make sense to super extroverted people who want to be out with other people. And so I think that for not that you're that, but like super extroverted people that want to be out playing games, like playing games is not appealing to me at all. If I'm playing a game, I'm usually fawning. Like I'm usually doing what I think you want me to do. Not you, but someone else, right? And so I feel like the internet gave a lot of deeply introverted people, maybe people on the spectrum, a place to be that like works for us. And the people who think that everything, you know, like I used to drink out of a water hose crew thinks that we need to maintain that world.
Right.
Because that's a world that makes sense to me. And it's like, we didn't get hooked on the internet because the internet is some evil thing that just sucks people in. It's like the internet was like the world finally showing up in a way that like I could engage with it without massive amounts of stress. And so, yeah, I think it is like life experience, and you're very introverted, but you are different than me in a lot of ways. And you've gotten a lot more into the internet as a place for information, but you're not interested in like culture or studying the ways that people interact in culture. And so you don't use it that way. But it could seem like mindless whatever if you're looking at it from the outside. And for me, it wasn't about changing your opinion on it. That actually just kind of naturally happened on your own process. But for me, it was about standing in my truth, you know, that it's okay. And so when it comes to like these subjective perspectives, it just kind of comes down to like letting you have your opinion on it and also feeling okay with what I'm doing. And using other people's opinions as a mirror for like, what's the word I want to use? Like testing. What's that called? Fire testing? Like really testing whether or not that's really my truth. Yeah. Like, you know.
Testing, and then also being open to like something that your perspective couldn't have deduced. And this other person's perspective might be seeing something that is actually valuable.
Yeah.
That you don't need to necessarily like change your perspective, but you open it more to like, oh, that I like that little bit of what you're saying. I don't see it the exact same way, but that's a good point that you brought in. I'm going to take that and use that as well. Like, for instance, with that specifically, the balance and the emphasis of like, it can be negative. It's not all just great.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh yeah, you're right. There is that. But so we are both able to like stand more in our truth and expand a bit more. That provides that connection to the other where you honor each other's perspective, and we agree on this little thing, and so therefore there's like a balance mechanism that happens, you know.
Yeah, I feel like what you helped me learn about that was the lack of presence in the physical reality that happens as the result of being on the phone for a long time. So you helped me learn to get into my body.
Especially with kids, and that's where I think there's a need for balance and kind of like enforcing like timed uses of it, because you know, you deal with a kid that's like perpetually on their phone or iPad for a week. Now try them to get them to go do a chore or go be somewhere on time and be in their body. Good fucking luck. Like,
right.
It's very difficult to be present when you have this infinite screen of like next thing, this thought, this kind of song, this thought. It's just, then you come into your body and you're like, this is fucking boring. Like,
yeah.
Where's all the input? And you have to really work to tune into, oh, like there is a lot of input in the physical world, just coming in a very different way. It's very subtle. And so,
yeah. And just to be clear, neither one of us think like a free for all for kids on tech is.
Yeah. It's a difficult thing that we talk about a lot. It's like learning how to help them balance that, not like abstain completely. Because that's the other thing. We're moving into a world. The people that are like, I used to drink out of a garden hose and I used to go play out and on my bike and like the world moves slow. It's like, yeah, I loved that too. I lived in that world. But I'm not going to make my kids go back to that world because they're going to miss this world. Like we're here, we're in a digital world. They need to learn how to use it for reasons that we don't even fucking understand. Like we don't know exactly what's coming, and allowing them to get used to tech and understand it. There's all kinds of like hand-eye coordination that's happening. There's internal new like portals of imagination that they're able to access because of the way that they're using the tools, the AI tools, or the like building video games, being able to draw and paint things on a digital thing instead of paint. Like, I'm not saying it's necessarily better than painting with a real brush tactilely. Like that's great too. But to completely cut them off from this digital world seems irresponsible to set them up for what's coming. And I think that's where, like, I think we differ, where it's not like a full cut off from them using it, but it's learning how to like balance and not let them just like disappear into vegetable state and not be in their body. It's like to try to figure out how to do both, but we're not going back. Like, I think people that are very much like, social media is negative, and for kids up until they're the age of 18, they shouldn't have it. Great. Then they turn 18 and all the jobs are coding. All the jobs are built around computers. How do they get into that world? Like, you've set them up for failure, you know?
Yeah. I just think about how it, me too. So when I think about the shifts and changes in kind of how kids are, and it's not all kids. It's like I have a 15-year-old who is on the spectrum and is more oriented toward tech. Like they make digital art. You really can't find a topic that this kid doesn't have insight on. So you could tell they've just been deep diving every interest they've had since they were very young. Phoenix is also like gifted, and so they do very well in school, pick things up very fast, but almost always has some sort of tech. They get overstimulated in public, so they use headphones and music to kind of regulate. Very talented digital artist. And Lily's more social. She'd much rather be physically doing something. She has the same access to tech that Phoenix has had. they're both like, if you have something interesting for them to do, they forget the phones exist. Like, they are definitely not. If Phoenix pulls out the phone in a social situation, you know that Phoenix, who is a projector, also has run out of space.
Right.
I think that's another thing that, like, people would get offended that someone's on their phone and not read that, like, when I pull out my phone in a social situation, it means we have reached the max of my capacity for this interaction, and I'm using the phone to kind of isolate when I'm still physically around people. I have just gotten better at saying, out of space, I'm done now, you know. But if we all go on a family vacation and stuff, with, like, we went on one last year with our family, like my family and your family, you and I started, like, the phone became more of a thing towards the end because we just I don't have 7 days and 7 nights of socializing in me, you know. But anyway, I think about, like, it's kind of a thing where these teenagers don't care about getting their driver's license as much as, like, our generation, where you, like, couldn't, like, your 16th birthday, you're trying to get the driver's license. Statistically, teenagers are less interested in that. One thing I am kind of weird about is I think that cars are death machines and that we don't take them seriously enough. And so don't think I'm going to let the kids get a driver's license till they're 18. But it's like Phoenix doesn't give a shit, but Lily will, you know. But I think that life in 20 years will be mostly lived at home and in the local, like, in kind of compounds. That's, like, personally where I think the majority of culture is going. I think there will be vagabonds or whatever they're called. Like, there will be people who drive around, like, they van life, you know, and go from place to place. But the normalization, and I've known this for years, and I was cautious saying it, but now I think it's obvious enough. But I've been saying since 2020, we're not going to be flying all around the world. People are going to lose faith in airplanes' ability to stay in the sky. The roads and the bridges will start to deteriorate. Like, a lot of the things that make it to where we are busy worker bees are going to go away, and people are going to be home. And life is going to be mostly about consciousness. I believe that's my perspective of where we're going. So when I look at the personality changes that have come as a result of the tech, for some kids, not all kids, I just see that as like, oh, we are kind of naturally evolving to something that doesn't need constant external stimuli to, feel like they're living a valid life or whatever. And I still have a kid who is like that, who wants the external stimuli, but a lot of culture is going inward, is becoming very introverted, is becoming kind of homebodies. I think that things will continue to get crazier and crazier and crazier out in the world, and that will be, once again, pushing people home. And I think what home means will shift, And so when I see the dialogue about we used to ride our bike, and like, I'm nostalgic about those things as well. But I just think that's like a hierarchy of experience thing, where we're saying that the way that we lived when we were young is more valid than what reality means for these young people. And that's actually not a new take. That is just
what
being
every
a boomer.
generation has done. Every single generation. I used to walk uphill both ways to school. Now you get to drive a car or a bus, And I think we've seen that unfold. We've told the story before, but like the boomer generation that resists change and tries to stay in the old way don't know how to adapt to the new world.
Correct.
My grandma didn't know how to operate a CD player, thought it was stupid. And it was like, my parents took a minute to learn how to do computers because they resisted it for so long. And I think we're in that same boat now. We're in a transition and that's what I say with the kids. Like, I have letting them use it because like, I don't know what's coming, that might be an integral part of the evolution to be able to operate in a new world.
Yep.
And I see it the same way, like not being able to travel the globe in the same way that we have with planes and all this kind of like infrastructure is going to take a hit in some ways. But I still see it as being this dual split. Like on one level, on the conscious level, let's say the organic conscious expansion, ascension. I know for me, when I don't have obligations to travel and go out in the external world, and I'm allowed to just be home and follow my intuition of what I'm interested in. And I'm going to go read for 4 hours. I'm going to go then do music for 4 hours. And then I'm going to take a bath and exercise. And like, I can get my vehicle like operating at its like best capacity. And then I can expand my consciousness through knowledge or through creating. I can do all of those things. And to me, that timeline, there's like a split of like people that are doing that, like that can't travel and can't go get lost in the spectacle of external reality, can do inner work and start to expand. And we start to, you know, tune into telepathic communication. And I think on the extreme level, start to remember and learn how to enact like what we would call superpowers from this perception. Like, at some point, we know how to travel the globe in our minds, in our perception, and move our astral body to a different location and communicate with someone or do something. You have to lose the current way of travel, which is slow, and I have to go to the airport, I have to get a ticket, I have to get on the plane, I have to wait to go through baggage, I have to fly, that takes 6 hours to get where I'm going, I lose a whole day, now I'm in that location. I think we're going to start to learn these other parts of reality where you don't have to do the slow way. There's another way. But it comes with having to be still for a while, having to tune into your body, become healthy, and expand your consciousness. And you have to kind of be still to do that. It's just what it is. So I think the reality collapsing like that, that's the positive element of it, is like, for the people that want to do that, now you have the ability. It's what COVID did. Everybody was allowed to go do that now and gave permission to be with oneself and not have to go to work and deal with these obligations. But at the same time, the negative side of it, there's this other split where I could see the way we travel as well on a, let's say, like a more negative timeline or a synthetic expansion of consciousness would be plugging into digital technology and virtual worlds. So if I want to travel to Paris, I think you could probably do this now with certain virtual games and virtual AI stuff. If I want to go to Paris, I don't have to go there. I can put on some VR goggles and go experience it. I can walk around. I know there's a virtual game, I think I sent it to you on TikTok a while ago, that is like a flight simulator or something, but it's not like planes. You can literally use Google Maps and fly over the globe and like see it as if you were in a plane. And then you can click and go down into the city and walk around. And so somebody was using it they were trying to relocate and they wanted to go pick a city, but they didn't have money to go fly and go in time to go explore the city. So they did it with this VR and found the house that was for sale, went and looked at it, like went down on the ground, walked around it, looked at it, and then was like, okay, what's close to here? Where's the closest grocery store? They looked that up, and then they could like zoom over to it and go, oh, it's 5 blocks away. Okay. Oh, look over here too. There's a cool bar. There's a cool like theme park here. And they could explore that whole area before taking the jump to go move. And so there's going to be a world where, you know, I think people that don't do the inner work, the organic, like expanding your consciousness, you're going to kind of expand your consciousness in a virtual world with technology, with the way AI is kind of taking our thinking modality and being able to just ask ChatGPT for the answer and it gives it to you instead of having to go do the research in a book. Or even Google now is like archaically slow and it's a lot of false information. I think ChatGPT has false information too, but it's all speeding up so fast that I could see with the infrastructure collapsing and automatons just moving straight into that world, there's the risk of being pulled into virtual worlds and an actual like disempowerment under the guise of like expanded ability to travel the world and have experiences that you want. Just put this VR goggles on, and it's already magnificent when you put VR goggles on. Like, you're there.
It's so crazy. Where you do the one where you're like standing on a
plank.
Yeah.
And it's visceral. Your nervous system freaks out.
You cannot convince your body that you're not going to fall off of that plank.
And that's just where we're at. I mean, 10 years from now, it's going to be a full-on experience.
Well, there's already like a lot of people who are very much living in VR worlds, and I've seen some like recordings or whatever where they believe that if someone touches them in the VR world, they can feel it.
Yeah.
In their, that's a valid way of being. It's not my cup of tea, but like, I would go to Paris if I could do it in the VR and not actually have to leave the house.
And that's what so then you have these like what
I'm just not getting a chip put in me. You're not putting technology inside of my body. That's my only line.
Right. As of now, we'll say that. And I agree. But then so what I'm saying is that there's these two kind of very clear splits. And I say it's like organic ascension and then synthetic ascension. But then there is a blend. I think if one is conscious and has done a lot of healing in their body and done this more organic path, I do see a future for that reality having conscious tech instilled within it. But that relies on the people making the tech being conscious.
Right.
And
yeah,
so
that's
we're kind of not there. There seems to be like some companies doing that, some people that are innovating that tech, but it is being blockaded and not mainstream.
Yeah.
But however, if you're conscious, you can use ChatGPT as a really great source and have discernment to go, oh, this information it gave me doesn't feel true. I now need to go do some more research in the organic way of finding the book or finding whatever and finding what resonates. And so I think there's a path to like use tech in a conscious way that can expand the mind with your soul intact. The other path, at some point, you lose connection with your individuality, your soul. And I think that's far down the line. But like we are at a split where you're kind of like making a choice. And if you're not conscious, some of this stuff's going to come in so quick and be so magnificent and completely take over your senses and everything that like you're not going to notice when the click happens and when you like can't go back, you know. And there is a side of it that I think that, you know, putting the tech in your body and having it connect to your nervous system and your brain, right now I see as a very like apocalyptic kind of thing. It's like it's dystopian.
Well, the aliens would have to show me something different, but the aliens, this was, 20 something years ago, talked about a microchip scenario that people would like think was a miracle because it was solving some massive problem. And that the microchip would claim to do one thing, but what it would actually do is broadcast into your field thoughts that weren't your own. And so you would like basically be giving up your free will, but you wouldn't know it because you would think you were doing what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah.
And it basically turned people into like drones controlled by whatever they were. And so it just would have to be a completely different scenario for me to not look at it like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I agree, and
it would not
I don't
be under
see
a
it happening anytime soon. I mean, because there's just so much control over that tech. There's so much regulation that like it's being made by people that primarily subconsciously, some of them conscious of doing what they're doing, of like pulling this other timeline where it's like ultimate control and really kicking the soul out of the body and taking over people to be able to control them for their bidding. But, I see so many like similarities just within what I feel like I know to be true as far as the ability for human consciousness to do magnificent things is latent. It's there already. And a lot of that we could say is like high tech, like when you think about like what it was like to be in Atlantis and all the like stories you hear of it, a very advanced way of being that I think some was probably kind of dystopian tech, but a lot of it also was just organic consciousness. And from our perspective of where we're at now, we would say that's like magic, and I think that that's that's like also kind of coming online. And the odd thing is, like, the thing about putting a chip in your mind or in your body so you could have a voice being spoken to you to tell you what to do that you think is your higher self, I'm pretty sure is already there. Like, they have that ability, like the military does. I forget the name of it, but there are these certain like projects. They always call it Project something, that the CIA was messing with. They were doing it a lot in the 70s, and I forget the dude's name, but he developed a tech that they called like the voice of God, that within a certain proximity, they could put a voice into somebody's head and tell them things. And this is where we got a lot of fake channeling. And some people claim that's what the law of one is, because the guy who invented it was very connected to Don Elkins and was using him as an experiment. And Don Elkins even says in interviews, like, this was an experiment to see if we could telepathically connect to something. And potentially, like, and I think that's even how he met Carla, was like, hey, do you want to try this experiment? We're working on this experiment. And he wasn't being transparent that it's like, it's directed by somebody else. It's in an office down the street, like, that's going to tune in. Now, is this to say that I think it's just paradoxical? It's not to say that the law of one is false, because I think the same modality, like that same tech, the same neural network that is broadcasting and can channel like information from other beings, other awarenesses, is the same tech that this guy was using to use the voice of God. So it could have been both, and there could have been some divine information that came through that same conduit that was opened up for the reason of the voice of God.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the fact that that tech's already there, and that was in the 70s, it's being used, right? Like, so this is the thing when we've talked about hyperdimensional beings nudging other people through their thoughts and through their consciousness, being able to discern, is this voice coming from myself, or is this coming from another being that is I'm connected to, that I can trust? And that all happens by developing your consciousness, doing trauma work, realizing you've been lied to. All of that work is so you can discern that. If you haven't done that work and all of a sudden this voice comes into your head, you're like, oh my God, I'm channeling something. And you just do whatever it's telling you. And really, it's military tech from a guy down the street. And
Right.
maybe it's not even down the street now. They can do it across the globe. This is what we're dealing with. I think that tech is already there. But if they can get it to the point where they can put the chip in your body and you then have no connection to your higher self or to the actual neural network that is organic, then you're captured, and you might believe you're talking to God, but it ain't, And putting tech in the body, I think, is going to start to really mess up the nervous system and the organic way we would connect to spirit or to the
Yeah,
ether.
I mean, the way the materialists do everything. I mean, Western medicine doesn't even address the entire body. Do
Right.
you know what I mean? It's like they just found out what fascia is. We're not letting them put. I don't trust any of these motherfuckers. Like, this entire thing would have to collapse, and I don't know. It just doesn't feel. It feels like parallel to each other. There will be people stepping into their real power and remembering who they are, and then the materialist paradigm will be offering a artificial version
Yes.
of that. And, maybe that'll be like great for some people. More power to you. That's all like kind of speculation, but it does simultaneously feel like we are moving into a heavily technological era and a back to like fundamental basics era. And so I think it's something that we can't even really connect in our minds because we are heavily influenced and conditioned by the industrial age. I do believe the industrial age is ending, and that things will be very decentralized and home-based for most. And then I think there will be these kind of like, or I could see, I guess, there being these like technological cities where people go to kind of try to maintain an infrastructure feeling
Right.
type, materialist feeling reality. And so I don't think everyone will be doing the same thing. And I really only have visions for America. I don't really, I'm not connected experientially to other places, so I can't say about other places. But I feel like, and you can see this, people will be creating small local communities, like focused on something very different than people who are like trying to live in something more technological.
Yeah. And I want to emphasize that from just hearing that idea, like right out the gate, I think we want to think, oh, the infrastructure is falling. I can't fly to wherever. Oh no, reality is going to become apocalyptic and I'm going to be stuck at home. It's limited. My reality is limited now. To me, I don't believe that. Like, just in my own experience of not having to travel and not do that stuff, like being home, reality is expanding in a magical way that is conscious driven. And when you expand your conscious, when you're able to stay home, like you realize you don't need to fly there, right? Like you can experience it in your mind. So I'm just emphasizing that, like, the idea of infrastructure collapsing does not necessarily, for conscious beings that are working and expanding and remembering these latent abilities, it's a gift. It's not limitation.
Yeah, I think the desire to travel becomes less and less for conscious beings.
Right, but just in general, the idea of infrastructure collapsing, most people go, oh no.
Yeah, it's just scary to most people. It's already like half collapsed. It's already like we're in it. It's the way that we picture it is like it collapses in 5 minutes and it's horrible, but it's like we've been in the collapse. And so after a while of the food is poison, the food is poison, the food is poison, and not just like artificial poison, but like there's a recall every 5 minutes now. People will just kind of start to naturally start making their own food. You know what I mean? Or just that everything's so expensive. People just kind of naturally start going to this. It just starts to, we stop equating travel with freedom and we start equating travel with pain in the ass or danger or whatever. It's like a process. It's decades long process that just kind of pushes you inward. And after a while, you realize, I mean, I can't tell you how many sessions I do with people who are like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't want to go out. I just want to sit in my house and study consciousness. It's like, that's where reality is going. I have friends who are conscious. P the Fairy is like in Japan every 5 minutes, in Korea and stuff. It's like, if you want to do that, you can go do that. Like by the time the infrastructure collapses to the point that no one's using it, we could be 50, 100 years in the future. It's probably not going to happen in your lifetime. I'm just more speaking to the trend that's already happening, where people are already naturally going inward, naturally, like, the infrastructure isn't supporting everyone running around like a chicken with their head cut off. Like, no one had time to ponder consciousness when we lived like that, right? But if you still want to do that, you're going to be able to do that. It might look different eventually, but yeah, I feel like people who aren't like already on that path get freaked out by that idea.
Yeah. And to me, a lot of the clarity of this is that studying the fourth density stuff, if that's what the earth is going through, if we're transitioning to that fourth density, reality is outside of time. You have the ability to move outside of time. So therefore travel is not a thing when you're outside of time. That is all conscious access. And it's an expansion into a new level of being. The old one has to collapse. And what looks like we're losing something is actually opening up a door, and we're creating a bridge to something,
Yeah, this is a great
new
segue into the last thing I wanted to talk about, and then we have to go. So every time we talk about resistance, I feel like people misunderstand. Not everyone, but some people misunderstand what I'm saying. So I'm going to explain it again, although I feel like I've explained it a couple 100,000 times. And this may once again be a lost in translation things, because there's like, resistance holds multiple meanings, especially when we're talking about the political landscape. Okay. So when I'm talking about resistance, I'm talking about denial of reality. it's the phase of grief where you get so stuck in this shouldn't have happened that you're not able to reach acceptance in your grieving process. Okay. And so when, grief is in like sadness that someone is gone can last the rest of your life. But when you are in the active phases of grief, and I'm not saying this as an expert in the official phases of grief, I'm saying this as someone who's grieved and worked with people who are grieving. The phases until you reach the acceptance of what is, they're gone. You can shadow box that it shouldn't have happened. And a lot of people get trapped there. I mean, I know people who've lost kids that just could never accept that happened. And, their entire life deteriorated. When I'm talking about resistance, I'm talking about getting stuck in this shouldn't, quote unquote, shouldn't be happening. And there's a difference between I am morally not aligned with what's happening, or I am sad about what's happening, or I am outraged by what is happening, I am grieving what's happening, and this shouldn't be happening. The reason that this shouldn't be happening is a matrix trap is because it is happening. So you're in denial of what is, okay? And what happens when you're in denial of what is by saying it shouldn't be happening, and there's a distinction between it shouldn't happen and this is horrible. Those are two different things. This is a disgusting thing that's happening. Fine. This shouldn't be happening. Destructive to your own personal energy. The reason is because you then can't navigate what's happening because you are in resistance to what is happening. And the way that people engage with a lot of the political landscape is just disempowering. That doesn't mean when I say it's disempowering, that doesn't mean I think it's great what's happening. That doesn't mean I'm sitting in a place of privilege and so it doesn't affect me, so I don't give a shit. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring it. It just means that resistance is self-destructive and depleting of energy is just like, I don't know, that's just a fact from my perspective. And so
it locks you in from never moving on.
It locks you in like you're just spinning out in a circle.
Yeah.
So I guess an example of this, let me check with the statute of limitations real quick. I think a lot of my relation to the government is informed by having spent a lot of time around criminals. Like I was raised around criminals because my mom was a drug dealer. And then like I went on to do drugs and was around criminals. And so the way that criminals navigate authority is like, that's very much that like informs the way that I look at fascism. Is when I look at fascism, I go, okay, well, this is authority that's going to need to be circumvented. That means I'm going to go around. Subvert, meaning I'm going to do it anyway, but like find a way to go around it, right? And when I'm talking about like political things, a lot of the things that I see in how people are engaging with what they believe to be a fascist regime, which I don't disagree that there's fascism happening. I just disagree that it's a right thing. I think one side plays good cop and the other side plays bad cop. One opens the borders so that the other one can get freaked out about the borders so that they have an excuse to start deporting U.S. citizens. Right. They're all working together. And I believe that the left gives people hope. They say the things to give people hope so that they don't actually learn how to subvert authority. That's my opinion on the entire thing. Do I think it's disgusting? Yes. Does it make me feel a lot of emotions? For sure. Do I hate that it's happening? Absolutely. Do I say it shouldn't be well, it's happening. So shouldn't is fuck the fuck am I doing with that? Do you know what I mean? So Hypothetically, let's say in a completely fantasy scenario in which I have no life experience, a group of people want to do something that is against the law. And there are cops out looking for you doing this thing, right? You don't then go stand in the streets and say, I'm going to do this thing anyway. In the criminal world, you figure out how to do it. You figure out how to get away with it. Do you know what I mean? And so you're not fighting the law. You're subverting the law. Okay. So I believe, and this is my own perspective. It doesn't fucking apply to your perspective. Let it take what resonates, leave the rest. But my perspective on what's happening is that the controllers that have controlled for a long time through, breads and circuses and psyops and propaganda have lost control of the masses and will continue to lose control of the masses. So they're going to go for a swift, overt attempt at domination. I believe they're going to try to use technology because that's really the only hope they have, is to get everyone trapped in, or as many people as possible, trapped into some sort of technological surveillance, whatever. That's why I don't have fucking smart meters. We don't have smart appliances. We've gone to great lengths to prevent that type of surveillance in our house. We've had to get a couple things that you just fucking straight up cannot get, not smart anymore. And, I'm mindful of all of that. I absolutely believe that the controllers are going for one last shot at domination. I don't think it's going to work, but it might work for a few minutes, and I think in that, spending a lot of time, what I see people spending a lot of time on is I told you so's. People spend a lot of energy on, I told you guys this was happening and we should have voted different or whatever. It's I don't resonate with any of that. Of course it was going to happen. We've known, psychics have known this was going to happen for a long time. Astrologers have known this is going to happen for a lot of time. People who recognize patterns, it's kind of written, that it was going to happen. We have lived in a control system that people were not aware of. People are becoming aware of it. So the controllers have to do something different. So they're going to go for the gusto in the final moments. I don't resonate with spending a ton of energy mourning the old system or trying to go back to the old system or trying to convince psychopaths to not be psychopaths. I think when you're in a situation where you're dealing with a psychopath, it's important to recognize they're a psychopath and figure out how to protect your energy in that. So when I talk about divestment, I don't know why people here ignore. I don't know what that, I don't know if that's being willfully obtuse or just waiting for someone who you perceive to have privilege saying something that, you know what I mean? It's just,
I think people believe they can change it if they pay attention to it and get everybody to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
In
And
a
I'm
way
not, yeah.
That's not, like you're saying, it's not recognizing it and seeing that it is and then subverting it or removing your energy. They don't realize that resisting that it's happening is not going to help it, but they think that's going to make it go away.
Yeah.
That's why it's a vicious cycle. And it actually pulls you into what they're trying to do.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the U.S. government, I'm not talking about local governments or whatever. When we're talking about the U.S. government, we are talking about a control system. And in my opinion, it always has been. And it has been about controlling the masses through all the things I've already listed. So now that the masses have woken up, it's just kind of masks off because very little of the propaganda is working anymore. And you're seeing this right now because the left and right are coming together on topics like Israel, right? So you're seeing like very quickly, everyone's starting to see the wizard behind the curtain. So the literal only chance they have to maintain power is to go full like violent force. And that just also is not going to work, I don't believe. But like, as we see this rising up, when I'm talking about divesting, I'm talking about seeing psychopaths as psychopaths and understanding how psychopaths work. So divestment is, let's say we're talking about narcissists, because I feel like people have more experience with narcissists than psychopaths.
She's a baby psychopath.
Yeah. So when you're talking about a narcissist, and let's say you were in a relationship with a narcissist and now you've separated, but you share a kid. So you're like stuck with them. Or let's say your mom is a narcissist. And so you're just people you're kind of stuck with, right? Through your process of learning how to deal with a narcissist, you learn to stop getting swept up in the shit that they say that is for the purpose of stealing your energy. Okay. So like a narcissist will just straight up tell you that you said something you didn't say. And when you're early in your journey of dealing with a narcissist, you will call everyone you know and be like, they said this and I didn't do this. And you'll fight with them all day. Well, that's what they want. They want your energy. Okay. When you're a veteran at dealing with narcissists, you understand the gray rock. Okay. Gray rock is divestment. Gray rock is when you become uninteresting to a narcissist because you don't give them an emotional response, but you set boundaries. You're just like, no. And then when they want to like pull you into a fucking back and forth about it, you just go, no, that's it. And you just keep it business, right? So what's happening there is you are divesting. You're not ignoring. You have to deal with them. You're not pretending they don't exist like an idiot. You're not sticking your fingers in your ears and going, la, 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 love and light, love and light, love and light. You're showing up, you're meeting the moment, but you're meeting the moment in your power. And you're not fantasizing that the narcissist is anything other than a narcissist. You're accepting that this is a narcissist. They are not capable of showing up healthy. No amount of over-explaining myself or entering into power struggles is going to make them be different. My issue with how people deal with the fucking billionaires and government is that these are psychopaths. They are unwell, unhealthy, emotionally immature is too generous. They're psychopaths. And so when I'm talking about acceptance and divestment, I'm talking about we don't let them get us swept up. Like Donald Trump is a narcissist. Like he's funny sometimes. Like he may tell you things that you want to hear, but the man's a narcissist. You gotta be out of your mind to not know that the man's a narcissist. Every single fucking thing he says has to be like 5 minutes of sucking his own dick before he can get to the point. You might feel aligned with a couple of the things he says. He might say he's going to fit. Like, who cares? That doesn't change the fact he's a narcissist. For the people that find him triggering, you haven't accepted that he's a narcissist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So when I hear people being like, Donald Trump said this, it's like, I don't pay attention to what that dude says because he's a narcissist. And so everything he's saying is for the purpose of like validating his own self-worth. His entire thing and why he's easily exploited but also difficult to exploit in other ways is because the man's only motivated by proving something to his dad. And so when we're talking about billionaires, Elon Musk or whatever, it's like engaging your energy into it's not fair or it shouldn't be when you're talking about mentally unwell psychopaths is a gigantic waste of your energy. They already exist. Okay. So when you're a criminal, which is what you're going to be under a truly fascist regime, just fucking like wanting to be free, you don't go, it's not fair. This shouldn't be. You go, the country is run by fascists. The country is run by narcissists. The country is run by psychopaths. What do I need to do to navigate around that? And it's like, it's the thing I keep trying to explain when people are like, you know, if it was 1930s Germany and you want to know what you would be doing, you're doing it right now. It's like, I sure as fuck would not be on my roof screaming, fuck the Nazis. You wouldn't, the Nazis would think I was like, hi Nazis. And then I would have a basement full of people that I'm hiding. Right. Do you know what I mean? Because that's subverting authority rather than shadow boxing. And so it's the lack of acceptance of what is that takes you out of your power. It's the thing. And I'm not shading people who protest or whatever. I think the reason that this gets lost in translation is because resistance means fighting the man.
Right.
I personally do not believe that in 2025 protests are doing anything. I think that they were very helpful in consensus reality. And as we're moving out of consensus reality, they were also very helpful at a time where the internet didn't exist. And so physically getting out there forced the news to talk about things, which forced people to have new ideas, which forced the government to move the needle. You know, it didn't move it far. They just gave you enough to calm you the fuck down and then moved on. Right. But I don't personally participate in protests because I don't personally, I think they do something for the individuals that are in it. But I think that when I'm talking about subversion is different than resistance. And I'm not speaking from a place of like, ignore it because love and light, because my life is great. Because if we are in a fascist, like if they have their way, your money and your fucking comfort ain't going to mean shit. It's not going to mean shit if they collapse the dollar. Do you know what I mean? So what I have to take me into what's coming is my abilities to subvert authority and my ability to meet the moment, no matter what the limitation is. It's not the comfort. Like we talked about this on episode I deleted, but like I don't expect anything that I have right now to be here forever by any fucking stretch. You know, the shit that they're trying to pull off. I mean, any money that we do have could be gone tomorrow. So, and we live like that. We live with the assumption that, you know, some unprecedented flood comes through the area. I don't trust the insurance companies to pay out. Like, I don't trust any of it. So I don't assume anything that I have as a comfort right now is a comfort guaranteed to me later. And when I see things happening to other people, I don't say that's not going to happen to me because I'm in a place of privilege. Like I'm sure there are some people who think like that. I'm way too tuned in to, I'm way too fear motivated. I'm way too first line for that shit. So when I'm talking about resistance, I'm talking about energetically ejaculating all of your energy into something that does not shift reality. And when I'm talking about acceptance, I'm talking about that's a psychopath. Now what? That's against the law. Now what? When I'm talking like when they make abortion against the law, I go, so okay, how do you do it anyway? Because like criminals don't go, meth is illegal, we're not allowed to make it. Yeah. They go, how do we get away with making it? And to be honest, it's so frustrating to me because we're actually talked on the $20 tier about me doing an in-person class. I would love to literally break down for people how to do things, but like the part of me that does understand crime just is not capable of fucking doing that on the internet where everything is being transcribed by AI and fed to the government.
This is even, I think this conversation is so important, but it's towing the line. You know? Yeah. I think it's really important to be said. And it's crazy. I mean, I love everything you just said. It's perfect. And imagining, like, this is the thing that everybody always talks about is like, there are way more people than the fucking little bit group of psychopaths that are criminals themselves too. I think that's the other delineation is like, you have to be, they're all criminals. So accept that. And then the way to navigate them is like, be a criminal yourself. You have to play on their level. Yeah. All the shit that they do is so subverted and like, you can't tell what they're actually doing. But if everybody did this, the gray rock tactic, this is what people are talking about, where like the power can shift so quickly. You can collapse the thing, and like that's how you change it. You don't go directly and fight the man fist to fist. You fight it with this like pulling your energy back, stepping into your power. And when everybody does that, there's nothing for the psychopathic narcissist to feed on. Right. And then we have the controls as a group, and that's the fucking trick of it, you know. But getting lost in the spectacle, and they rely on chaos, like that's why this is so crazy right now, is like they're pulling every stop, because if you keep people triggered in chaos, like you prevent them from getting into their power, and you get delusioned by the spectacle. You get pulled in and think, I need to say something with this, and that's what keeps you trapped in.
And you can say stuff. I say stuff. I talk about things, but it's the emotional. It's so hard to explain, because it's like, I cry all the time watching what's happening to people. I get like, I feel feelings. I'm a human being. I feel feelings. And I'm not even saying not to feel feelings.
Right.
I'm talking about the way that we engage with those feelings. And it's also just like very obviously to me how much it's manufactured. So we both work to make sure that we have like left and right, like algorithms. You have to work really hard to get to, if you have a left, like I spend more time on the left, so it's hard to get the right stuff. So I'll have to go search it a lot. But for people who are not doing that, which is most people, because they've tricked you into living in a bubble so they can get away with these psyops. What happened when Biden got into office was they started feeding the people on the right these videos, which I've seen a ton of them, of just constant floods of migrants into the country. And all of the videos were just military age men. So then they also pumped a bunch of propaganda that all these military age men, and they weren't just coming from, they were coming through Mexico, but they weren't from Mexico. They were from China and, Iran and whatever. And they were pumping into the people on the right that these were all coming to do like sleeper cell stuff. Like they were all from our political enemies, and they were just all going to come in the country, buy guns, and, that the government was basically paying them. The Democratic government was paying them. And I don't know, they told them like,
they were going to take your jobs too.
Not even about the jobs. The shit that was happening right before the election was they're going to kill you. Like they're here to kill you. And then there was a bunch of shit about Venezuelan gangs in Ohio, I think. And so it was a lot of like threat of violence. I think that historically they used, they're going to take your jobs. And there was some job stuff. But the thing that made people is making people on the right really cheer for ICE is these videos that who knows if they were real or AI or what, but we've seen a million of them, of like droves, millions of military age men. There were no children in those videos. There were no women in those videos. It was very specifically men like 18 to 25. And so the people on the right have been fed all of that propaganda. The people on the left don't fuck with the people on the right, so they don't see it. So they don't have that context. So then ICE starts, their thing. And all I've seen from the left are videos of women and children being ripped from their homes. People, like old people who've been here for 50 years. Like that's all the left is seeing. So the people on the left and the right cannot fucking figure out, like the people on the right look like psychopaths and the people on the left look like psychopaths, because both sides are going like, the right is going, how can you not care that they're going to kill us all? And the left is going, how can you not care that they're kidnapping families?
Right.
And they manufacture consent through this kind of shit all the time. They get the left riled up about something, and then the left cheers for the government to fucking infringe on someone's rights because they don't care about the rights. So I would say the mandates in 2021 were an example of that. And then they do the same thing to the right, where they villainize the left, and then they manufacture consent by something like, banning abortion. And then they trick you into cheering for someone else's bodily autonomy to be taken, because it sets a precedent that like then they can do that to you. And then they just keep doing that until the government has so much fucking power now. It's crazy. And it's through this manufactured consent of the left and the right, and the left and the right living in bubbles to where they don't know it. So like you and I watched it. I was like, we watched them pump this in, and it's like, I'm not for ICE, dude. I'm not for the government having power to fucking deport and send them to some like death camp in another country without like it's going to happen. I understand that it's going to happen because the government's going to go, it's going to go really nuts before it fizzles out, I think.
But one of the only reasons that can happen is, like you're saying, is because of the consent on either side, the manufacturer.
Correct.
So everybody's rooting for it, and they don't realize what they're actually rooting for because they're caught up in the narrative that they've been given that they're rooting for something positive. And that's the power of, like, really, if you're divested from that, they actually can't do it because they would all of a sudden show up and everybody would be like, what? Why are you doing this?
Yeah, if everyone was like, fuck this. So, like, I don't know if there were a bunch of military age men. There's no way for me to know. I wasn't there. Videos could be real. They could be fake. It could be the same video doctored over and over again. They could have paid actors. I don't know. I don't put anything past this government. I also don't, like, it doesn't feel outside the realm of possibility that there are, you know, the U.S. just fucks with people constantly. We've destabilized a million places. We have been empire. That is wrapping up. So it's also not outside the realm of possibility that there are groups that are going to activate. And like I have said repeatedly, like one thing that does not feel off the table for me in this apocalypse is war on U.S. soil. I mean, that's just like from a pendulum perspective, we're due for that. Like, I don't know how much karma you can rack up. That's a fantasy of privilege that I think a lot of people entertain, is like, we will always be safe here. And you can't just like sail a boat here to fight us or fly a plane because we are kind of an island. And so sending a bunch of military age men into the country while the borders are open, while it's easy to get in, to do that, that's not outside the realm of possibility. Do I think the solution is that the government get more power to fix that? No, because you're the ones that open the border. So this is just like 9/11, where you create a problem and the only way you can solve the problem is to take more of our freedoms.
Right.
So under no circumstances, even if there is a real risk, do I think the solution is the government have more power. But what happens is that that's divestment. Is like, yeah, I don't know, we're going to have to cross that bridge when we come to it because the government having more power is not the option.
Yeah.
That's divestment. I'm not ignoring it. I'm more educated on a lot of this stuff than a lot of people are because I'm constantly like looking at, not educated, but knowledgeable. I'm not ignoring it by any fucking stretch. But I do not think that the U.S. government is a solution to any problem whatsoever. So I am divested from the idea that it can be fixed, that it can be restored, that it can be rectified. It's rotten to the core. I believe it was born rotten, and it's got to go. And so that's divestment for me. So what's the solution outside of the U.S. government? Because this is a group of psychopath, insider trading, fucking greedy, just demons that don't give two fucks about if you live or die. You are just a worker bee to them. So what do we create without them? And I truly believe, and I might have to wait 10, 15 years for this to come true, this will fall via divestment. This will fall via, they cannot get the attention of people. It will not fall from protests. It will not fall from, like, if it was like truly you want to like subvert the, you know, become like a hacker or something and like fuck their shit up. But, you know, that'll probably happen from outside of the country. But from within the country, that thing will fall because people will ignore it as if it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about ignore it in like everything's okay because it hasn't affected me yet. I'm talking about ignore it in, stop playing with it. Stop believing that they're going to come up with a candidate who's going to be anything other than corrupt. Stop paying attention to it. Stop being outraged by it. Just go, yeah, we have a corrupt government, so I hide people in my house, or I redirect or misdirect. I don't know. I would probably have to have an in-person event to break it down for you. Okay, so did you have anything else to say? Sorry, I just fucking...
No, there's nothing else to add to that. You said all that could be said.
Sorry. All right. Mark has sessions. I think I have a couple sessions. It doesn't matter. The 2027 course is finished. It's $165. It is hella exhaustive in mechanics and perspectives. That's available at jessa.com. We're really working on the video, but we're a little, maybe next week.
Sweet. Love you. Bye.
Bye.